president trust you so much?
I think that it has to do with loyalty, but also, too, I'm very aggressive. I'm a very, very aggressive person.
This is a woman who was committed not once, but twice to a psychiatric hospital by her own parents, who now has the president's ear and now has her own desk at the Pentagon.
Candace Owens and Laura Loomer are at war and the receipts are flying. It started when Laura allegedly exposed details about the vehicles Candace and her husband used for their kids' school runs. Candace did not take that lightly. She fired back hard, digging through public records and dropping a bombshell claim that Laura may currently be living inside an inpatient facility. Candace posted about it publicly, pointing out that Pensacola, Florida has 3 psychiatric hospitals, one of which houses patients under the Baker Act, and that it sits close to where Loomer resides. She straight up asked, "Is Laura Loomer actually staying at Lakeview Center while pretending to rent a back apartment nearby?" Now here's where it gets deep. If you search Laura Loomer Baker Act, a wave of articles comes up. One of them pulls a screenshot from Grok stating that Laura was involuntarily committed twice under Florida's Baker Act, reportedly by her own father due to a mental health crisis and a bipolar diagnosis. That same report also claims this is why she is legally barred from owning firearms. But Candace didn't stop there. She also posted a theory that Laura's behavior shifted dramatically after Governor DeSantis signed SB 254.
It's bizarre to me, but he meant it, and he was asking me how to make it stop.
There are women who have spoken out and said that this is real, that she has assaulted many men. And like I said, she's never sued any of these people.
The bill banning gender-affirming care in Florida. According to Candace, just 10 days after that signing, Laura launched a fierce campaign accusing the governor's wife, Casey, of faking cancer and demanding her private medical records. Candace is now openly suggesting that this timeline might reveal the real motive behind Laura's attacks on the governor. And if that theory holds any weight, this whole situation just became a lot more personal than anyone realized. And that's not even the wildest part of Laura Loomer's story. There was already that uncomfortable video of Laura getting too close to a young man at a party, touching him, making him visibly uneasy, and just acting strange. But now the internet has taken things to a whole new level. Photos are circulating online of a man who many people claim looks strikingly similar to Laura, and social media is exploding with theories that this could be her before an alleged transition. People are openly calling her a spy, an intel asset, and pay close attention to this one, a controlled opposition infiltrator. Hold on to that phrase. It's coming back. Now, controlled opposition is very real, and here's what it means in practice. If Laura is actually playing that role,
we push back against the media on COVID, on lockdowns, on Ukraine, on the border, so maybe we should also ask a question: is the media totally presenting the truth when it comes to Israel? Just a question, that maybe we shouldn't believe everything the media says, because I know I've been conditioned to ask a lot more critical questions over the last couple of years.
Her entire job would be to create chaos, say outrageous things, and make the movement look so extreme that regular people want nothing to do with it. And if you scroll through her posts, that pattern is hard to ignore. Look at her latest move. She's been pushing panic about the Ebola virus, claiming it will spread through the US during the World Cup. She posted, "Spreading faster than can be controlled. World Cup is in the US in 15 days. How many Africans are coming?" She's even demanding a full travel shutdown from Africa. That is straight up fear-mongering. But here's where the money trail gets interesting. There is strong evidence that Laura has been financially backed by billionaire Robert Shillman, a man with deep ties to pro-Israel causes and a history of pulling funding from anyone who questions that agenda. Laura has publicly called him a wonderful man. Some of you might recognize that name. Shillman was one of the major Turning Point donors who reportedly cut ties with Charlie Kirk after Charlie began questioning certain positions on Israel. According to journalist Max Blumenthal, Shillman canceled a significant donation to TUSA shortly before Charlie's passing. And wouldn't you know it, Laura was one of the loudest voices trashing Charlie right before that happened. She called him a charlatan and a backstabber, said he was a political opportunist, and posted, "I don't ever want to hear Charlie Kirk claim he is pro-Trump ever again." She later deleted another post where she wrote that Charlie speaks out of both sides of his mouth. And on top of all that, the Boston Globe reported that Laura has been actively courting donors around the importance of Israel, all while preparing to launch her own newsletter, The Loomer. The funding connections here run deep. And that newsletter isn't just a side project, it has a very specific mission. It's explicitly built to run opposition research on right-wing figures who are critical of Israel people Laura calls the woke Reich. And her number one target? Tucker Carlson. If you follow her on X, you already know she goes after Tucker almost every single day. But this isn't random beef. This is a calculated, funded operation. Think about the timing. Think about the targets. Think about who benefits every single time Laura opens her mouth and goes after another prominent conservative voice. Because when you lay it all out, the picture gets very clear, very fast. Look at the full list of people Laura has aggressively attacked. Tucker Carlson, Joe Kent, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey, Candace Owens, and Charlie Kirk. These are not random names. These are some of the most prominent voices in the conservative space who have, at one point or another, questioned or criticized Israeli policy or foreign aid. That is not a coincidence. That is a target list. And here's what makes it even more suspicious. Laura doesn't attack them once and move on. She goes back repeatedly, escalating every single time, making sure the pressure stays on. That's not passion, that's a job. Even Roger Stone noticed the pattern. He publicly threatened to expose Laura's financial records specifically because of her obsessive campaign against Israel critics. And what did Laura do the second he said that? She immediately turned around and accused Roger Stone of being a foreign agent. No evidence, no receipts, just a quick redirect to make him the story instead of her funding. Classic controlled opposition playbook: when someone gets too close to the truth, attack their credibility before they can attack yours. But here's what's truly wild. Scroll through Laura's entire posting history and you will struggle to find sustained, aggressive attacks against Democrats. She'll occasionally toss one out there to keep up appearances, but her real energy, her real focus, her real fury, it is always directed at conservatives who step out of line on one specific issue. Always. That pattern alone should make every critical thinker stop and ask why. And while she's out here pointing fingers at everyone else, screaming about foreign agents and outside influence, she herself is being directly bankrolled by Robert Shillman, a billionaire whose organization openly and actively supports a foreign military. The audacity of that contradiction is almost impressive. She's accusing others of the exact thing she is doing, and doing it loudly enough that most people never look past the noise to see what's underneath. She also aggressively, consistently, and very publicly defends AIPAC, one of the most powerful foreign policy lobbying forces in American politics. And at this point, between the Shillman funding, the AIPAC defense, and the very specific list of people she targets, the picture of who Laura Loomer actually represents has never been clearer. Now let's talk about Robert Shillman more specifically, because this man does not get nearly enough scrutiny considering how much influence he appears to have over the conservative media landscape. Shillman is not just a donor. He is a strategic funder who has historically used his money to shape narratives, build platforms, and based on what we've seen, pull the plug on people who go off script. His ties to pro-Israel causes run deep, and his funding has flowed into multiple conservative media operations over the years. Laura is not the first person he has backed, and the pattern of who he funds and who he abandons tells a very revealing story. Remember what happened with Charlie Kirk in Turning Point USA. Charlie had built one of the largest conservative youth organizations in the country, with massive donor support behind him. But when Charlie started to shift when he began asking harder questions about foreign policy and America's role in overseas conflicts, the money started drying up. And according to journalist Max Blumenthal, Shillman was among those who cancelled significant donations to TUSA in response to that shift. Days later, Charlie was gone. That is a connection that deserves to be examined seriously and openly. Not sensationalized, not turned into conspiracy, but examined. Because if a billionaire donor pulls funding from a major conservative organization, the moment its leader starts questioning a specific foreign policy position, and that leader then passes away shortly after, people have every right to ask questions. Serious ones. And now that same billionaire is the primary financial force behind Laura Loomer, the woman who was loudly and publicly trashing Charlie Kirk in the weeks leading up to his death. She called him a charlatan, a backstabber, and a political opportunist. She said she never wanted to hear his name associated with the pro-Trump movement again. She later deleted a post calling him two-faced. And all of that happened while she was being funded by someone who had just pulled major money from Charlie's organization. Connect those dots yourself. So let's zoom out even further, because this goes beyond just Laura Loomer. This is about a much larger infrastructure that exists to control the narrative inside conservative and right-wing spaces. Controlled opposition is not a new concept. It has been used throughout history by governments, intelligence agencies, and powerful interest groups to infiltrate and redirect movements that threaten their interests. The strategy is simple but effective. You don't fight a movement from the outside, because that only makes it stronger. Instead, you place your own people inside it. You let them build credibility, gain trust, and then slowly steer the conversation away from anything that could cause real damage to the people pulling the strings. And the way you identify controlled opposition is not by what they say, it's by what they never say, who they never attack, and who is signing their checks. Laura hits every marker on that list. She never meaningfully challenges the power structures that fund her. She never turns her investigative energy toward the actual forces shaping American foreign policy at the highest levels. Instead, she keeps the audience focused on chaos, on personalities, on outrage, because an audience that is angry and distracted is an audience that isn't asking the deeper questions. Look at the Ebola posts. Look at the race baiting around the World Cup. Look at the constant manufactured panic. None of that moves the needle on anything real. None of it holds actual power accountable. It just keeps people scared, divided, and clicking. And someone is profiting from every single click. Now, the Baker Act history is still a significant part of this story. Let's not completely brush past it. 2 alleged involuntary commitments before the age of 18, a reported bipolar diagnosis, and a legal restriction on firearm ownership. That history is documented enough that it keeps resurfacing no matter how many times Laura dismisses it. And Candace Owens clearly felt it was relevant enough to post about publicly, which is not something you do casually when you're a public figure at her level, unless you're very confident in what you're putting out. There. But here's the important distinction that history, real or exaggerated, is being used as a distraction. The moment people start debating whether Laura was committed, whether she's really living in a facility, whether those old photos are actually her, they stop talking about Shillman. They stop talking about AIPAC. They stop talking about the funding. And that is exactly how this kind of operation is designed to work. The circus exists to protect the money, and the money is what actually matters. There's also the question of the newsletter itself, the Loomer, and what it actually represents as a product. Laura has been actively courting high-net-worth donors around the importance of Israel, positioning the newsletter as an opposition research tool specifically targeting conservatives who criticize Israeli policy. She is openly building a funded media operation with a foreign policy agenda baked directly into its mission statement. That's not commentary, that's an apparatus. And the people she goes after through that apparatus are not random critics. They are the most influential voices in the space with the largest audiences and the most potential to shift public opinion. Tucker Carlson alone reaches tens of millions of people. If you can discredit Tucker, distract Tucker, or just keep Tucker constantly defending himself against wild accusations, you neutralize one of the most powerful independent voices in American media. And who benefits from that? Not the American people, not the conservative base, not the MAGA movement. Follow the money and you'll find your answer. The same logic applies to every name on that target list. Marjorie Taylor Greene has been one of the loudest voices in Congress questioning foreign aid. Thomas Massie has consistently voted against overseas military spending. Joe Kent built his entire platform around America First foreign policy. These are not soft targets, these are people with real influence over real policy. And Laura goes after all of them with the same relentless, funded aggression. And let's not forget the way Laura handles anyone who starts asking questions about her own funding. She doesn't engage with the argument, she detonates a grenade. She calls them foreign agents, traitors, or anti-Semites. She floods the zone with noise until the original question gets buried. That's not the behavior of someone who is confident in the transparency of their own finances. That's the behavior of someone who cannot afford to have those finances examined too closely. So here's where we land after pulling all of this apart. Laura Loomer might genuinely believe everything she says. She might be fully convinced that she's fighting for the right side. But belief and function are two different things. A person can be sincerely passionate and still be strategically useful to forces they don't fully understand, or forces they understand completely and have chosen to serve. What we know for certain is this. She is funded by a billionaire with a specific foreign policy agenda. She targets a very specific group of people who all share one common position. She deflects every question about her funding with accusations. She generates maximum chaos while producing minimum accountability. And the one topic she will never seriously investigate, the one thread she will never pull, is the network of money and influence that keeps her platform alive. That is the story. Not the surgery rumors, not the facility drama, not the old photos circulating on social media. The money, the agenda, and the very deliberate way this whole operation is structured to keep audiences distracted while real power moves in the background, completely unchallenged and almost entirely invisible. While everyone's debating Laura's appearance, her mental health history, or whether she lives in an apartment or a facility, nobody is sitting down and seriously mapping out who funds her, what those funders want, and what has happened to the people who got in the way of those interests. That question is the one that matters. That is the question that should be everywhere right now. So drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Laura is a true believer, a controlled asset, or something in between? Because this conversation is long overdue, and the more people are talking about it, the harder it becomes to bury. If this video connected dots that the mainstream refuses to touch, hit that like button right now. It helps more people find this content and keeps this kind of investigation alive. Share this with someone in your circle who asks the right questions, because they need to see this. Subscribe so you never miss the next deep dive, and keep leaving your thoughts below. Your comments genuinely shape where this channel goes next. See you in the next one!